It's the night of May 15th, 1945. Somewhere in the Strait of Malacca, 5 British destroyers move into position, spread wide in the dark, their instruments glowing faintly red. Below deck, sailors eat quietly or wait in silence, packed in tight quarters under sealed hatches. Outside, flashes of lightning crack across the sky, briefly illuminating the rain-slick sea. Radar screens flicker. Then, contacts. Multiple shapes moving steadily south. The trap is nearly set. The target is the Japanese cruiser Haguro, a veteran of battles across the Pacific, now attempting a final supply mission to the Andaman Islands. Escorted by a single destroyer, she sails unaware into one of the last classic surface engagements of the war. On the bridge of Saumarez, Captain Power gives the final orders. Across the formation, torpedo crews make their last checks. Far ahead, on Haguro, Vice Admiral Hashimoto and Captain Sugiura still believe the strait ahead is clear. They do not know that aircraft have already reported their position. They do not know that the British are waiting. In minutes, radar pings will turn to explosions, and the final act of Haguro's career will begin. By May 1945, the sun was setting on the once mighty Imperial Japanese Navy. Scattered remnants of its surface fleet clung to isolated harbors, more symbolic than strategic. Among the last of its major warships, still operational in the Indian Ocean theater, was the heavy cruiser Haguro, a stalwart of the 5th Cruiser Squadron. For over 3 years, she had seen action from the Java Sea to the Aleutians, and now remained one of the very few large surface combatants left to protect Japan's deteriorating perimeter. As the Allies pushed closer to Japan from all directions, the Japanese High Command sought to consolidate and extract their outlying garrisons. Under Field Marshal Count Terauchi and the Southern Army Area Command headquartered in Saigon, the Japanese began an ambitious evacuation initiative. Designated by codenames Show and Transportation Plan No. 10, these operations aim to relocate troops from scattered islands to fortified zones in Malaya and Indochina. Transportation Plan No. 10, under the Southern Command's Shogo framework, aimed to evacuate isolated garrisons such as the Andamans. Despite the pressing need for manpower in central sectors, the Japanese Navy was critically overextended. Years of attritional losses, particularly at Leyte Gulf and in the submarine war, had decimated its carrier strength and support ships. Now, missions once supported by fleets were handled by isolated cruisers, armed but increasingly vulnerable. To compensate, the Japanese turned to fast, independent runs through contested waters, leveraging night movement and coastal familiarity. These were risky, improvised operations, intended less to win and more to delay defeat. But Japan's means no longer matched its ambitions. Of the once imposing combined fleet, only 2 heavy cruisers, Haguro and Ashigara, and the aging destroyer Kamikaze were available in that theater, to escort and protect these evacuations. Their role was crucial, not because they could turn the tide of the war, but because they represented the last vestiges of Japan's offensive naval power in the region. Vice Admiral Shintaro Hashimoto, an experienced and respected officer, took command of the 5th Cruiser Squadron from Singapore. His task: escort Japanese troopships, beginning with a run to Port Blair and the Nicobar Islands. Vice Admiral Hashimoto had served with distinction throughout the war. He now faced an impossible situation: carry out vital evacuation missions with almost no air cover, dwindling fuel stocks, and enemy submarines and aircraft controlling key choke points. Still, the Japanese Imperial Navy expected action, not hesitation. In early May, Hashimoto and Captain Kaju Sugiura prepared Haguro for another sortie. A previous attempt to reach the Andamans had been aborted after a suspected Allied presence was reported. This second mission would proceed regardless. Haguro was no ordinary relic. A Myoko-class heavy cruiser completed in 1929, she had exceeded the 10,000-ton Washington Treaty limit from the start and displaced over 15,000 tons fully loaded. She carried 10 8-inch guns capable of firing 275-pound shells to over 31,000 yards, or roughly 28 kilometers, supplemented by 8 5-inch guns and an arsenal of 25mm anti-aircraft weapons. While she had been refitted multiple times, the ship had not seen dry dock in months, and her maximum speed was likely diminished. Nevertheless, she remained heavily armed, armored, and more than a match on paper for any individual Allied destroyer she might face. Now, the same cruiser class operated without the shield of carriers, and without the fleet structure for which they had been designed. She had limited search radar, and her Type 22 radar lacked the resolution to match Allied fire control systems. Her anti-aircraft suite, though strong, was far less effective against skilled, modern Allied aircraft, operating in coordination. What Haguro did not have was air cover. By early 1945, the 13th Air Fleet, her nominal protector, existed more in name than in force, reduced to a skeletal formation with just 50 fighters and a handful of torpedo bombers. Inter-service rivalry and aircraft losses meant even this skeletal support couldn't be reliably summoned. Opposing them was the Royal Navy's East Indies Fleet, led by Captain Manly Power and reinforced by ultra-intercepts of Japanese naval communications. Operating out of Trincomalee, Ceylon, the British were well informed of the enemy's intentions. Wireless intercepts had picked up planning traffic for several weeks, and Haguro's previous sortie attempt had only strengthened the British sense of timing. The Allies had already attempted to intercept her in early May without success. Now, Power was determined not to let her slip through again. The strategic context for the East Indies Fleet had changed dramatically over the previous year. Once under strength and considered a backwater command, it had steadily received reinforcements as American pressure freed up the two naval units. By mid-1945, the fleet boasted multiple destroyer flotillas, aircraft carriers, and a growing submarine presence. While still overshadowed by the Pacific juggernaut of the US Navy, the East Indies Fleet was capable of striking hard where opportunities presented themselves. The destroyers assigned to the mission, Saumarez, Venus, Verulam, Virago, and Vigilant of the 26th Destroyer Flotilla, were modern, nimble, and well-trained. Each carried 4 4.7-inch guns and 10 torpedo tubes. Though individually outgunned, they had the advantage of radar, speed, and night fighting doctrine. They had rehearsed the star attack formation repeatedly, a complex pincer maneuver allowing ships to approach from multiple vectors and launch torpedoes simultaneously. Captain Power intended to strike at night, where British radar superiority and destroyer agility could be decisive. Despite his preparations, Power knew the risks. A daylight engagement would expose his ships to the full wrath of Haguro's heavier guns. Worse, if the Japanese managed to break through and reach the safety of Singapore, the opportunity might not come again. The battle plan relied on deception and the element of surprise. Aircraft from the escort carrier Emperor shadowed Haguro, relaying her position and launching a bomb attack to delay and distract her. Weather reports indicated mixed visibility with potential for rain squalls, ideal conditions for radar-equipped British destroyers. The plan called for the 26th Flotilla to lie in wait in the approaches to the Malacca Strait, using radar to track incoming targets, then execute a coordinated torpedo ambush. Success would mean the elimination of one of Japan's last remaining heavy cruisers. Failure could mean a costly counterattack from an enemy still capable of striking hard. Intelligence reports from Sumatra and the Andaman Sea warned of Allied activity, but without air reconnaissance or reliable radar coverage, they had no concrete knowledge of the trap forming around them. Hashimoto made the fateful decision to sortie anyway. Navigational concerns, especially avoiding minefields in the Malacca Strait, caused further complications. The ship's navigating officer, Commander Ota, advised caution. To avoid high-speed passage through mined straits at night, Haguro reduced speed intermittently. At 4 p.m., 3 Avengers from the escort carrier Emperor located the Japanese cruiser during a long-range search. At 3:41 p.m., one of the aircraft spotted Haguro and Kamikaze from 12 miles away, confirming their course and speed. The Avengers climbed and attacked, diving from 10,000 feet under heavy anti-aircraft fire. Though no bombs struck the cruiser, the sighting confirmed her location and heading. This critical piece of information allowed the British to move their destroyers into intercept position ahead of nightfall. As the sky darkened over the Strait of Malacca on the night of May 15th, the British destroyers of the 26th Flotilla assumed their positions. Venus approached from the northwest, paralleling the Japanese column. Saumarez, Verulam, Vigilant, and Virago fanned out to the south, forming a wide, radar-guided arc intended to intercept and overwhelm the Japanese cruiser as it moved southeast. The destroyers were spaced approximately 4 miles apart, forming a crescent-shaped trap that spanned the width of the strait. Their formation allowed overlapping radar coverage and multiple torpedo launch angles. The flotilla operated under strict radio silence, relying on radar bearings and pre-arranged timing to execute the attack. The weather played to British advantage. Rain squalls and lightning bursts offered concealment and sudden flashes of illumination. The destroyers operated with instruments dimmed, torpedo tubes primed, and rangefinders checked. Below decks, men waited quietly, knowing contact was imminent. By midnight, intermittent radar echoes confirmed the Japanese ships were entering the net. The destroyers adjusted their stations. Captain Power, aboard Saumarez, monitored the approach and kept radio communication to the bare minimum. By 12:50 a.m. on May 16th, Haguro's radar had detected the British formation. Contacts had appeared 10 miles ahead. Lookouts, scanning the darkness through powerful optics, confirmed multiple shapes blocking their path to Singapore. The officer of the watch had delayed reporting, and the window to maneuver preemptively was gone. On the bridge, Vice Admiral Hashimoto and Captain Sugiura took control. Alarms were raised. The cruiser was already inside the jaws of the ambush. 4 destroyers loomed ahead, and the 5th, Venus, was visible on the radar screen, stalking them from the rear starboard quarter. Haguro had walked into a textbook British destroyer encirclement. Sugiura immediately ordered a hard starboard turn and called for all guns to open fire. Hashimoto issued new orders: break contact and escape north toward Penang. The cruiser's forward turrets barked into the night. Shells flashed overhead, but without radar-directed fire control, their accuracy was limited. Still, their presence forced the destroyers to maneuver cautiously. As Haguro turned, she came bow-on toward Venus. Lightning flickered. The destroyer's crew saw the silhouette of the heavy cruiser emerge. At 1:06 a.m., Venus's commander ordered to attack. The torpedoes were set to fire, but amid confusion, the tubes failed to launch. The opportunity slipped away as Haguro steamed past unharmed. Behind her, Kamikaze struggled to keep pace. Haguro's abrupt maneuver threw the escort's formation into chaos. The destroyer veered out of position, nearly colliding with the cruiser. Kamikaze was hit early by Saumarez and began evasive action. Damaged, she disengaged and withdrew north toward Penang. As she withdrew, Kamikaze may have signaled contact before withdrawing, though Allied forces intercepted no detailed reports. Verulam picked up Haguro on radar again and closed in. At a range of under 2,000 yards, she fired a full spread of torpedoes and peeled away at high speed. The hits were devastating. 3 massive explosions tore into Haguro's port side. One detonated near the bow, the second under the forward turrets, the third near the engine spaces. Flames erupted along the forward decks. Inside a turret, ammunition ignited. The deck above was peeled open like a can. The cruiser listed 30 degrees to port and held. Forward batteries went silent. Power began to fail across multiple compartments. In the lower decks, sailors scrambled through smoke-filled corridors. Bulkheads groaned under the strain. Some compartments began flooding immediately. The emergency power supply kicked in briefly, but critical systems were already compromised. Despite the damage, Haguro's aft guns fired sporadically. Captain Sugiura ordered a smoke screen, but with reduced speed, the smoke rose ineffectively. AA crews manned their stations, shooting at flashes in the dark, but there was no coordination. The main fire control circuits were gone. At 1:24 a.m., Venus returned. She launched another spread of 6 torpedoes from 2,500 yards, manually aimed. As she turned away, her crew believed all tubes had fired, but a later inspection revealed that 2 had remained unfired. Still, the attack was effective. New blasts rumbled through the water, though it was impossible to say how many had struck home. Saumarez now closed. At 1:27, she fired her torpedoes. The sea around Haguro erupted in fountains of water. During the exchange, Haguro managed to score a hit. A shell struck Saumarez's starboard side amidships, knocking out a boiler room. Inside, British crew members were thrown to the deck. Leading stoker Ginger Elliott was killed instantly. Steam burst from ruptured pipes. Damage control teams battled to contain the damage as smoke filled the passageways. Emergency lighting flickered as men scrambled to regain control. Communications between bridge and engine compartments were briefly severed. Despite the impact, Saumarez remained in the fight, steering manually while engineers contained the flooding. The ship's speed was reduced, but she could still maneuver. Vigilant and Virago joined the attack. One after another, the destroyers launched torpedoes from different bearings. In total, 38 torpedoes were fired. The salvo was not simultaneous but staggered, each attack coordinated through radar bearings and preset firing arcs. Haguro crumbled under the assault. The forward hull was a ruin. The aft superstructure was wrecked. On Haguro, the bridge was hit by a 4.7-inch shell, likely from Saumarez. Vice Admiral Hashimoto was killed instantly. Captain Sugiura was badly wounded. Most of the bridge crew were also killed. Command broke down. The radar room fell silent. Runners attempted to carry orders aft, but found shattered passageways and collapsed decks. In the radio shack, no outgoing signals were received. Men scrambled for damage control stations. Others tried to counter-flood to correct the list. Some jumped overboard as compartments flooded. Others stayed at their posts. But there was no direction left, only isolated efforts amid smoke and fire. Venus, now coordinating with Virago, turned back in. But at 1:39, she was warned off by Vigilant. Still holding her final 2 torpedoes, Venus circled at a distance, waiting for the last strike opportunity. At 1:47, she requested permission to make a final attack run. 4 minutes later, Power gave the signal. Close and make a job of it. At 2:02, Venus approached from 1,200 yards. The sea was lit with lightning and star shells. The wreck of Haguro was visible among the flashes, heavily listed, decks awash, her flag still faintly visible through the smoke. The last 2 torpedoes were fired, both struck, one forward, one aft. A deep shuddering tremor passed through the hull. Flames erupted along the stern. The wreck rolled to port. Some crew leapt into the sea, others went down with the ship, trapped in compartments or wounded beyond escape. The sound of explosions was followed by eerie quiet as the cruiser slipped below. From the bridges and decks of every destroyer, men watched as Haguro slowly capsized. Her shape turned to shadow, then vanished beneath the surface. At 2:06, Venus signaled, "Enemy cruiser sunk." A few minutes earlier, Venus's direction finder had picked up Japanese signals, possibly kamikaze. No further contact was made. The destroyers made a brief search for survivors but recovered none. A few flickering flares and rafts were sighted before the search was called off. The destroyers had only minutes to search before turning north. Daylight was approaching, and lingering in the area risked counterattack from Japanese aircraft or submarines. At 2:12, Captain Power ordered his destroyers to turn away and extinguish lights. Among the Japanese crew, Lieutenant Motora survived the sinking. He saw Captain Sugiura nearby in the water, alive but mortally wounded. By sunrise, only debris remained, although sources conflict slightly on the number of casualties. Approximately 900 Japanese sailors were killed in the sinking, including Vice Admiral Hashimoto and Captain Sugiura. Of Haguro's crew, around 320 survived, rescued later by Japanese vessels. At 2:40, Power signaled his report. "Enemy cruiser sunk. Enemy destroyer unaccounted for. Saumarez 1 boiler room out of action. Remainder of 26th DF not, I repeat, not damaged." The engagement had lasted just over an hour. The last heavy cruiser of the Imperial Japanese Navy in the Indian Ocean was gone. The destroyers returned to the fleet that morning. 2 British sailors had been killed, leading stoker Ginger Elliott and stoker Hendren. Their bodies were committed to the sea with naval honours at 10:55 a.m. Flags were lowered to half-mast. On the Japanese side, kamikaze returned to the area during daylight and picked up around 320 survivors. The rest, estimated at over 900, were lost. Vice Admiral Hashimoto and Captain Sujura were among the dead. Haguro's sinking marked the end of Japanese heavy cruiser operations in the Indian Ocean. No further large surface ships would sortie into those waters. The loss was significant, but went largely unacknowledged by Japanese naval command at the time. Kamikaze's post-battle signal made no mention of the cruiser's fate. In the following days, British officers and crew were commended. Decorations were awarded and mentions in dispatches were issued across the flotilla. Some officers later felt the action received less attention than it might have, overshadowed by the end of the war in Europe or events unfolding elsewhere in the Pacific. The engagement was over, but the campaign in Southeast Asia continued. Thank you for watching this video. Please leave a like. It really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.